There is nothing worse than reading a 20-page complex science paper, feeling super productive and then closing the tab and then realizing 20 minutes later, you cannot remember anything you just read. For the first year of my PhD, I treated reading kind of like a checkbox, something that had to be done. I thought if my eyes touched the words, then I was working. But my brain was leaking information faster than I could take it in. And I was just drowning in PDFs. So I stopped trying to memorize everything and built an external brain. Now, I like to do the system on OneNote because that's where I keep everything. However, this can be done on Excel, Word, Notion, whatever works better for you. Now, these 6 columns is how I track every single paper that I read. It turns passive reading into an active system so that future Aku doesn't need to read the same paper 5 times when writing her thesis. Hi, if you're new here, my name's Aku and I'm a second-year neuroscience PhD student studying in London. Now, let's get into how I track and remember what I read. First, the basics. Column 1, the paper title, and column 2, the link. I know this does sound obvious, but don't just save the paper into a random PDF on your computer because this will get lost. And for the link, always use the DOI. I've made the mistake before of saving the university library link, and sometimes these do expire. So that does mean I technically lost the paper. However, the DOI is permanent, and you'll thank yourself 3 years later when you're writing your thesis. And now for the next column, primary or secondary. Not every paper you read needs to use 100% of your brain energy. A primary paper normally means that this is crucial for my research and I should take time to read it. However, a secondary paper is normally just an overview of the field. It's a cool summary of the science. I don't need to memorize the data and I do give myself permission to skim. The biggest burnout trap for every PhD student is treating every paper like it's a primary paper. You physically cannot read every paper ever written in depth. So it's very important to pick out which ones are very relevant to your research and which ones are interesting, but not as relevant. Now, the next column is the short description column. And the rule here is to describe this like you're at a cocktail party or explaining your research to someone outside your field. And I either do this by sometimes summarizing the abstract or reading the whole paper and writing a short summary myself. I love to force myself to write this in plain English because if I can't explain it simply, it can mean that I didn't fully understand it. For example, instead of writing something like investigating dopaminergic pathways, I'll write something like adding protein X made the neurons grow faster, just so it's easier for me to understand when I come back and read it in the future. And now my next column is interesting techniques. I use this column to list out all the specific techniques they used. Why? Because 6 months from now, when I need to know how to stain one of my organoids or run a qPCR, I can just Control F the keywords in my OneNote and I can find it. And I can instantly find 5 papers that already used that technique. It's kind of like building a recipe book for future experiments. Now, most people do skip the method section, and please, please, please do not do this, even if the results don't make sense. You can learn a lot about how other people do their science, and it's very important for your development as a scientist. Finally, the full summary. I write down the key findings, the gaps, and sometimes what I didn't like about the paper, or what they could have done differently. Now, I write this in my own voice. For example, I can write something like, they claimed this, but their sample size was tiny. Or their graph on page 4 contradicts their conclusions. So if I ever need to write a literature review, or when I'm writing my thesis, I can just copy and paste these thoughts instead of rereading the whole PDF. And now this will save me hours of work. So you can think of this column as an argument builder. You aren't only summarizing the whole paper, but you are thinking critically and building arguments. And this is what will take you from student to scientist. And now this isn't just a list, it's a whole database of everything I've read in regards to my research, which I do find very helpful. So you don't need a fancy app or subscription, just something that future you would thank you for. And let me know in the comments, are you a digital note taker or do you prefer pen and paper? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.